Just some thoughts on the whole, the open Q&A forum and what the idea is. I've always felt that studying parenting is really a journey. Um, we learn, we explore, and I think the best results come when we're open to new ideas. We try to be flexible. I was interviewed by a wonderful Rav in Chicago named Rabbi Leonard Matenki a couple of months ago when COVID was at its height, and he asked me what my 2-3 pieces of advice to parents would be, and just I immediately responded, which I believe to be the case. I said that, to be flexible. Um, when there's an issue in the family, to try to treat it like a family problem. I'll explain what that means in a moment. Um, and the third thing was to do what's right for your children, and which sometimes or often means ignoring what other people are thinking. And I really think it's that the hybrid of those qualities, to be flexible, meaning not to be dogmatic or locked into a certain way of thinking, but rather to find different solutions. Um, to try to, when I said about thinking of it as a family problem, what that means is, what it looks like is, when we look to deal with an issue, rather than blaming it on a particular child. Okay, what it sounds like is, Rabbi Horowitz, we're having an issue in our family. We're open to anything. Let's discuss, give us some ideas or some direction, and to do what's right for the children. Very often, especially if you live, in a community and you're surrounded by people, and when a child does some antisocial behaviors, or is acting out in one way or another, um, the proper way, or the best way to do it, is often to close an eye. But how does that look like? Just imagine if you're on a farm all by yourself with no neighbors, as opposed to being in the middle of a community. How would you do it? Let's say you're going to say something about your child's dress, or how they're interacting, or anything else about their life. Would you do the same if you were on a farm by yourself? And that's a very difficult. I don't suggest that any of these things are easy, but it's a process. This is how I encourage you to think about it, and think of it as, again, to be flexible, to be open to learning new things, which you're on. That's why you're on tonight, and to try to implement them, and with the understanding that it's not always going to be an easy ride, but rather exploration will give you more skills to become more self-confident and to feel more empowered. I'm going to unmute again. Like I said, I have a few questions that I'd like to get to, but I'll be glad to start with you. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourselves. So feel free to, if any of you would like to unmute. Again, let's just leave it as our own understanding. The default position is to stay muted. If there's something you want to share or you have a question, just unmute yourself and speak. If not, I'll get to the questions that were sent, and we'll move on that way. Please, anyone have any thoughts, any questions?
Is this about like anything under the sun?
You can ask any parenting question is fine. It could be COVID related. It could be pre-Pesach related. It could be teen related. But this really, I specifically set it up like this. Sometimes I pick a topic and I have question and answer afterwards. I really set this up as an open forum, partially because unfortunately, I don't have the time always to respond to people who have questions. So I figured, let's just try this out for a couple of weeks. We'll make a safe space for parents to be able to ask whatever's on your mind, and I'll be glad to take them as they come. Okay, so Natalie, is that you?
Yes. So thank
Please.
you. Thank you
Sure.
so much for.
Absolutely. Sure.
So I guess I could start off with for a preteen who, is looking to be more independent and feel like less controlled by their parents, I guess, quote unquote, I'm struggling with, do I enforce a bedtime? Um, like what should, I mean, he's pushing back in terms of like having limitations set. And I'm not sure what the right approach is to take.
So, Natalie, is this your oldest? Is this your oldest child, Natalie?
Yes.
Okay, so that's part of it, right? So
Yes, it is.
yes, so that's no, that's good. I'm saying that it's good that you're asking now. But just understand, this is part of the learning curve. So I would strongly suggest that you just start by reading up on adolescence. How old is your child? It sounded like preteen. Is that right?
11.
11. Okay. So the research shows that like 10, 11 is when the kids are in midst of this stage called the tweens, what we call tweens, which is like, little teenagers. And then it settles in for a while, that some of these symptoms diminish a bit. And then at 13, 14, it starts to kick in. And Natalie, the really important thing to keep in mind is that all of this is predictable and normal. I always say by the time your third teenager comes around, that's why I asked you if it's your first, you get used to this sort of, and you're able to act in a more rational way. I did a series of videos during the summer. There were 7 videos. You can look it up. It's on my YouTube page. Just look up for, it was called Mentoring or Supervising. It was called Deep Dive into Bed. Video number 1 is all about the adolescence, how it occurs, why they act the way they do, what the research shows about the frontal lobe development and other things like that. So what I hear is that you're getting pushback, and let me just pull this out a bit. You're getting pushback to restrictions that you're making or rules that you're making. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, like if he wants to go out, I usually want to know what time he plans on coming back, and if he doesn't come back by that time, I tell him I have to be able to trust you. And, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to let him go out because I have to know that when he says something, he's keeping to it. So he gets very upset, why are you always trying to control me? Things like that.
No, so that's perfectly normal. It sounds from the way you're describing, it sounds like you're handling it very well. Like, you're giving him flexibility. You're letting him know when you expect him home, and there should be consequences. It's okay to have consequences, and you should have consequences if he violates the curfew or your rule about when he should call in. And try not to get intimidated by pushback as long as it's done in a respectful way. But you should have these ongoing discussions. Children very clearly understand the logic behind guidelines that you have, and the more you sit down and talk about it, the better it is, and more likely that they'll eventually listen. But again, this is a process. It's a process, and if he's complaining, try to ask him to come up with a coherent explanation. Why are you unhappy? And be flat. If he comes back and he says, "Well, I'd like to stay out an extra half hour," for example, talk about it. Why is it important? And set up. We used to have in my yeshiva, and I try to do this with the children at home, simple rules for communication. Natalie, we teach our children a lot of different skills. Did you ever spend time teaching them how to dissent? Think of it that, I'm sorry?
No, I just chuckled.
Why'd you chuckle? Go, tell me.
I guess we take things for granted that like they know certain things.
Exactly, right. Right. So the truth is, when you tell your kids, clean up your room or put your book bag in order, right? They might not know how to do it, and you haven't given them instructions for that. So one of the things that I used to do is we used to, um, don't no negotiating on the fires. We had three rules, and this isn't cast in stone. Whatever works for you, but speak softly. You can't say no to me. You could tell me why you'd like to do things differently and give me a reason for that. I ran a school with hundreds of kids. They all knew that if we had something and they wanted to talk to me, that was the formula. Rebbe, you said that we only have 15 minutes of recess today. Could you please do 25 because it's the first nice day in 3 weeks and we haven't been out, or we had a lot of, so it comes, and try not to lose yourself, because once you lose yourself, you're not the boss anymore. That one of the things I often tell parents, especially when dealing with your first adolescent, is that only the boss negotiates, right? So when your child is negotiating with you, that means that he or she acknowledges that they have to listen to you, just they'd like you to say something else. So they're starting off with a compliment. They will never say it that way. But as long as that's happening, you're in the driver's seat, and have these discussions. Try to get them to present it. If they yell or if they get upset, then just say, listen, it's okay. Don't try not to respond in an angry way. Just say, look, I know you're upset. Take a minute, take 30 seconds, take 10 minutes. Just come back when you can talk about it. I'll be glad to discuss it with you. Um, you know, I hope that these individual tips are helpful, but overall, again, this is very normal. Like I said, it's video number one from this summer. You can look it up on my YouTube page. It's all about how adolescence. It's a transition from being a child in your home to becoming adults, and that involves a lot of different steps. And this is normal. This is the normal way it goes. They're going to test your boundaries. They're going to quarrel with you, but try to stay even-handed, and just try to deal with it calmly. And again, help them talk to you in a way that accomplishes what they want, which is to convey that message to you, and you'll really listen. And sometimes you'll say yes, and sometimes you'll say no. And being reasonable like this allows you every once in a while to say just a flat out no, because I said so. Not something I would advise you to do often, but I think it's something that you should be able to, pull out at any given time. And again, if you're giving them consequences, one last thing, because I'd like to take some other questions, and like I said, I had some questions that people wrote in, but it's really important. Have you ever heard, Natalie, of outcome-based parenting or consequences? Are you familiar with the term?
Consequences, yes.
Like consequences rather than punishments.
Yes. That's like related to what we've done.
Exactly. My dear friend, Dr. Tversky, the son of the late, great Dr. Tversky, just passed away, Dr. Vincent Tversky, told me a beautiful vart, a thought on Pashas Yisro. It says that Yisro was Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. He came out to the desert to see the Bnei Yisrael, to see the Jewish people. And it says that he came for the bells and whistles. Rashi says, Vayishma Yisro, he heard. What did he hear? He heard about the miracles, the battle with Amalek, the Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. But it's fascinating. I never thought of that till Dr. Tversky, Dr. Benzin pointed it out. Later on, it says, Ata yadati ki gadol Hashem mikol ha'elakim. Now I know that the God of the Jews is the real God. And that's what Chazal say, that he experimented, all the deities around the world, the religions, until he came to the conclusion that Hashem of the Jewish people is correct. He says, Ata yadati ki gadol Hashem mikol ha'elakim. Now I know that God of the Jews is right, ki badavar ashazadu aleihem, that he punished Mitzrayim Mida keneged mida. It was measure for measure. They drowned the Jews in the sea. They got drowned. So and when the punishment is not just lashing out, but it's a consequence. It's an outcome. Then I would encourage you to look it up online. Outcome based or consequences. it's logical and the children can learn from it rather than just be a random punishment. So if two kids are fighting in the playroom, if two younger children or kids are fighting in the playroom and you say, both of you go up to your room, you're punished, to them it makes no sense. If you say something like, look, this is a public space, this is a space we share, and if you can't be civilized and play with each other well, then you have to go up to your private space until you can come back again. Same thing, just in one way, it was something that the kids could understand and deal with and process. So try to tie his behavior to whatever the violation, so to speak, was. Okay, stay in the game, keep learning, and you're on the right track.
So I
Okay.
shouldn't be fearful that the negative reactions is kind of like is affecting our relationship.
So look, that I obviously, I see my job as giving you tools, not telling you what to do, but you have to judge this for yourself. If it's happening more often, then you might want to have a serious talk about it. If you see he's very unhappy, try to find out what's bothering you. Usually, very often, you don't know what's really going on until you really, really listen. So, try to ask some probing, gentle questions that might find out, is there anything else that's frustrating him? Usually I call it an answer key. There's almost always an answer key. When you see children doing things that just don't make sense, it makes sense somewhere. So maybe the kids in the class are teasing him that he's never out there when they are. Or so just try to find out what that is. They themselves might not be in touch with what's really going on. So again, I would encourage you to have these conversations. I don't think you should be overly concerned. If you're concerned, I think it's a wonderful message for you to decide to go to a therapist for family counselor for a session together with your son. And you initiate it and say, look, sweetheart, I love you. Our relationship is everything. I can't just let you run around in the street. I'm flexible and I'm open enough to go talk it over with someone. What a wonderful message that would be. How does that sound?
Right. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let's go. Anybody else? Folks, unmute yourself if there's something you'd like to ask, please. Anyone, folks? Okay, so I'm going to go right away to I'm going to go to the three questions that were submitted today. Here's a question that a mom sent. Recently, I bought a 15-year-old an expensive laptop she wanted. Okay, because I really couldn't afford it. It was important based on her needs for school and our relationship. Now my 12-year-old is very upset and doesn't understand why when he wants something too expensive, I say I can't afford it, and so on and so forth. So any advice on how to respond? So I think, a broad understanding of that question would be a normal sibling rivalry, which has always been around since the beginning of time. One of the beautiful things of the Torah is that we see that our Chachamim didn't, the Torah, didn't cover up on the issues that all our greatest leaders had, right? Yakov Avinu had it in his own family. It's very normal for children to be upset if one child got something more than the other. This parent happened to have, wrote. I didn't want to read everything, but the parent wrote that money is very tight, and this really was a stretch for the older child. Because that older child needed it for work, and now the 12-year-old is complaining. I think it's time to really sit down and have a conversation. Maybe if it's possible, go back to the 15-year-old and say, look, I did it for you. Your brother needs it now. Maybe you could share, do a timeshare with a computer. I think that's a perfectly fair, it's a fair ask, even though those weren't the terms when it started. There may be other creative solutions. If you can't afford it, the mom who wrote that happened to have been a single parent. If you really can't afford it, I wouldn't say you should go into debt for something like that, but try to work something out within the family and have discussions about what their needs and wants are. Again, um, I many years ago, I brought in Dr. Norman Blumenthal to speak to the parents in my yeshiva. I did a parenting class, and I gave the parents choices of what they wanted to hear about. And the number one request was for sibling rivalry. That's what the parents in my yeshiva, wanted to hear about first. And I did not feel qualified at that time to give the talk. So I brought in Dr. Blumenthal, and he made everybody's night because he got up and he said that in some ways, sibling rivalry is a healthy competition for your love, for the love of the parents, which is a commodity. And he cited studies that unfortunately, never, very sadly, in homes that are chaotic and dysfunctional, never, there's less sibling rivalry, or very often there isn't as much, or there's no sibling rivalry. First of all, because the kids are uncomfortable enough to quarrel with each other. And there's no commodity, never, never. There's not that commodity of our love and our gifts and our other things isn't there that much. So if you're dealing with sibling rivalry, that's the good news. The good news is that it's normal, and it's a sign that you're, in this case, it's a monetary issue. Your gifts are a commodity. But again, like everything else, read up on it. The beauty. My wife and I, Baruch Hashem, we're married over 40 years, and we didn't have internet. You had to look everything up in the library. You really have everything at your disposal. Look up sibling rivalry. The more you understand that, I just keep saying it because I believe it so passionately. The more you understand, the more you learn, the more you can react to situations with a broader knowledge base. You're much better off. Anyone else, folks? I did want to talk about transitioning for the Yom Tovim to try to wean the kids off the technology that they've been exposed to throughout the year, because of the COVID and the like. Anyone please, the settings should allow you to unmute yourself. So if you have a question, again, everybody leave yourself muted, please. If anybody has a question, please just unmute yourself and fire away, please. Anyone, no particular order.
Okay, I have a question. I'm sorry, I signed on a little late. I was at parent-teacher conferences. So
That's
if you're
okay.
ready to discuss this, then
I'm glad you have a life. No worries. Go ahead.
I was excited about this class, but it ended late. So if you addressed this already, then I'll go back to the recording and listen to it.
Go ahead.
Something that I find myself struggling with is very much trusting I have some older teenage boys. Blee and Howard, they're good kids. They seem to have good judgment, but in the back of my head, I play these horror stories about the parents who didn't know, but their good kid was really out in the backyard or reading this under his covers or doing this behind her back. How do I get myself into a point of healthy perspective to allow my children to feel my trust without being frightened that there's things going on that I won't know about till it's too late?
That's a really great question. That's an excellent question. I think here's what I would encourage you. Rachel, is that Rachel?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your name is there. So I'm not a Navi, but so I think the best way to think about this in terms of a goal you set for yourself, would be to say that I would love to get to a place where my kids would confide in me if they're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's a heavy lift.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a heavy lift. That is certainly not a small thing. I just referred over the summer. I did a series of 7 videos on lessons. One of them, I think it was number 3. The title of the talk was "Would Your Kids Tell You?"
Mm-hmm.
That was exactly about this. So you're rightly concerned. Thankfully, you have your ear to the ground. You know what's going on. You know that not everything is always what it seems to be, and kids get into trouble. And you're afraid that, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're afraid that maybe something's going on that I don't know about. So the best way to be able to address this is if your child can come and talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm listening. Hmm.
So the way to do it, again, I would encourage you to have a look. I'm going to, though you signed up, I have emails. So I'm going to send around some references, some reading material or listening material to go in greater depth of some of the things we talked about. So that one was called, again, Would Your Kids Tell You? And it really, I encourage parents to think about it in terms of barriers. Why would kids not want to tell you if they're getting into trouble? Rachel, pick two quick ones and we'll deal with those, and then the rest of you go to the videotape, as they say. Let's go ahead. Why would a kid not tell you that they're getting into trouble?
They don't want you to be upset with them, disappointed with them, angry with them.
Okay, what's one?
Punishment.
There you go. So you just pick two. In the video, we identify 6 or 7 things, all logical things. They don't want to be punished. They don't embarrass you. They don't hurt your feelings. You might not get it. You're not going to keep the confidentiality, right? So there's a whole host of issues that would be would stop the kids from coming to you, right?
Mhm.
If it's a value that you want your children to be comfortable coming to you when they have issues that are real and need to be addressed, there's no other Rachel, there's no shortcut. You're going to have to remove every single one of those barriers. And
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm listening.
That's how I really encourage parents to think about it. In other words, you have a goal. You know why the goal is important. The experts in change say that you should set it up like this. Here's my goal. Here's why I want to do it. Therefore, I'm going to do this, right? One of the things that I encourage parents to think about also is, what's it going to cost me? What's this goal going to cost me? Let's say I have a goal, let's say, for example, not what you mentioned, but I'd like my kids to be more comfortable at home. I'd like my children to be comfortable at home. Why? Because it'll keep them out of trouble. I'll be able to see who their friends are. Therefore, I will. So think of what you would do if you wanted that. So, you'll make the house hospitable. You'll try not to hover over them, a helicopter all the time, give them some space. But what's it going to cost you? It's going to cost you cleanliness, a lot of money for food or whatever else teenagers are eating and doing, right? It's going to cost you privacy. It's going to cost you tranquility. You say it's worth it. So think about this value. If you have a value, I want my kids to be able to talk to me. So think of what the barriers are, how you can overcome them, and realize that there's a real price to pay in terms of your time, in terms of you might have to, you might not be as comfortable sleeping at night if you if you really know what's going on, right? Parents who are clueless sleep very well at night. Oh, Baruch Hashem, everybody's great, right? So if you're really gonna, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I remember one of your seminars a while ago listening to that and thinking
Okay, so I'm saying, if you really, if you want to know what's going on, it's going to cost you a little bit of your small intestine. So, all of these things go into that. Actually, at that particular session where I did, the topic was, would your kids tell you? I actually invited our youngest child, our daughter was 25. She was in our home for the summer. I actually invited her on she took Q&A from the parents.
That's cute.
It's really cute. You can look at it. She was really great. But I said, look, if you want to know what it's like if you have that relationship, like, how does it really work? So they can do whatever they want. If you're not used to this, it's a stretch. But she was really going through those answers with what it looks like. And if any of you have follow-up to this, I'll be glad to take it. But that's the big idea. The big idea, I don't think you should be paranoid and worry every moment what they're doing. But I do think the healthiest way to do this would be set it up so that they can talk to you. And you really, it's a conversation that you should have. Think about what the barriers are, but also have a real conversation with them about it. Okay, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Anybody else, folks? My greatest pleasure. Anyone? I'll wait a moment or two, and then I'll go on to some of the other questions. Anyone else, folks? Did I just hear an unmute?
I had a bit of a follow-up if no one else is going to.
Go ahead, Natalie. Yes, go.
So speaking about barriers, so wanting to have that like relaxed home and things like that, how do you also um, balance that with also wanting the kids to feel like a sense of responsibility in the home to pitch in and help out? And there's always some opposition to that. And so, how do you find the balance between the two? Because
Okay, it was,
I also
it was
feel like
actually
that's
it was actually one of the email questions.
uh,
I'll read it. I obviously I'm going to get to this before I was going to get to these before we turn them. But what's your advice for getting teens to contribute to the household by pitching in with meal prep, cleanup, taking out the trash? My teens feel it's not their job and don't seem to care, leading me to feel resentful and worried about the habits for the future life. So I think it's really about balance, about they should be contributing. I think the more let's put it this way: if you make a chart for what you want the kids to do, as opposed to giving them input and letting them pick something that folks, if anyone else is unmuted, you'd be kind enough to mute yourself, please. Um, please be kind enough to just mute yourself so we could. I want to leave the setting open that you could unmute yourself if you have a question. So, there's a lot of research into office rules that are followed, far more likely to be followed if there's input from the folks that that the rules affect. So it might be tempting to make a chart for what you want them to do, maybe give them an option, even if it's not your first choice, and it might not even be that helpful to you. It's something that you could do yourself. For some, again, it depends on your kid's nature. If your child is a rule follower and sure, mom, whatever you want, go for it and just be happy. But if your kid's a spunky kid and they're rule breakers and they're always looking to get one up on you, so it might, if you're really trying to teach them the value, then that value will be just as well served letting them pick something that they can contribute to the house in a way that might not involve a typical chore. And as I mentioned earlier with another topic, they might not know what those chores are. Don't never assume that children know what you think they know. So give them some choices and think of what they do well, and offer them a way to do it. I do think kids should contribute, but it all depends on so many variables. How's your relationship with them? Um, is your relationship strong enough that you can tussle over these issues? If your relationship is very strained with the child, I wouldn't advise you to start, making a big fuss over household chores. That's like not in the wheelhouse at the moment. So again, take all those variables into consideration. One thing you might want to look up, Stephen Covey has the 7 Habits of Effective People and Families. He's a brilliant author. He wrote a lot of books on along these lines. And one of the things he talks about an emotional bank account, where you think, and he says every relationship can take strain, can take a few steps backwards. The question is, do you have enough? Did you make enough deposits that think of it like literally like a bank? He says when you get into a fight or you get into a real quarrel, it's because you bounced the check. You didn't have enough in the bank before you made a withdrawal. So if you want your child to do chores, great. Make sure that everything else is right. Anyone else, folks? I have a serious question that I little heavier topic that I'd like to get to because I think it's extremely important. But I'll wait for a moment or two. Anyone else, folks? I hope you're all enjoying this as much as I am. It's great to learn and to learn together. Anyone else, folks? Okay, so let me go on and feel free to just formulate and think about what else you'd like to ask when I'm done with this. Our teenage daughter is very angry with life in general, particularly with Judaism. She curses anyone in the family regularly. It's almost impossible to discipline. How do we deal with Pesach and the Seder? She will not participate in getting ready for Pesach, which our other children really resent. She will almost definitely ruin any positive atmosphere. We don't want to tell her not to participate because we don't want to turn her further away. So this is where, things get really tricky. Um, I do feel very, very strongly that families should be together for Yom Tov, including if children are completely not observant, um, including adult children. I'll post up when I send you out some resources. I actually made a video a few years ago asking parents, it was the days before Pesach, asking parents to invite their non-religious kids home. And we get into these very understandable questions. What are the other kids going to say? How's it going to affect the family? And, my response to that is that, what's the message to the other children? The message to the other children is that we're a family and we do this and we love each other. And my love for you is not conditional on your acceptance of religion, as painful as that is. And think of it, the reverse of that would be if you say you're not welcome here because you're not religious or you're not keeping our families, what we consider dear to us. Um, if you're sending a child out because of that, you think the message to the other children is, there's lines that you can't cross. The message to other kids also might be that my love for you is conditional on your acceptance of religion. And that makes it very transactional. So, this is a question that has perplexed our leaders as well as, civilians for a very, very long time. I feel very strongly that we should try to explain to the child that's not observant, to be respectful of what the family wants. I very rarely had situations where kids don't listen when you give them a reasonable request in a reasonable tone of voice and giving them some input into it. Um, so again, I'll send out that video to the group if it's relevant to any of you. As a fascinating postscript to that was, I made a follow-up video a day or two later because, all my adult life working with teens at risk, I've been listening to parents talk about the pain of having children who the very legitimate, searing pain of having children who choose a different path or worse. And the 24, 36 hours after I did that first video, I was listening to children who are adult children and teens who are contacted me with the pain of being excluded from their family. So it's something I feel very strongly about. I don't want to get any more into it than this, but again, I'll send you out a resource if you're interested. One of the things that I'd like to point out to the mom who wrote this, and I think it was extremely perceptive. She wrote here, our teenage daughter is very angry with life in general, particularly with Judaism. So that's really important. And one of the ways that I think about it is in terms of when often we lump together in one big pile people who abandon religion, but there are really two groups. I call them a group that's ozvim et adat, that they abandon dat as religion, but they have great secular lives, meaning the child is in school, they're in college, they're working, they have a social life, they're popular, they enjoy their lives, they look forward to the next day, they're optimistic about the future, just they're not religious. Not that that's a small thing, but that's one category. And the other category is what I call nebuch ozvim et hachayim, that they abandon life really. And that means they're not in school. They're more likely to have dropped out of school. They're not using marijuana or light drinking. They're, God forbid, doing heroin and cocaine or very heavy drugs. They're not optimistic about the future. They're harming themselves, chas v'shalom, cutting or other things like that. So they're very angry with life in general. I tell parents that are in that situation that they really should not be dealing with the religious aspect that much, but rather find out what's broken. And usually those things are either trauma related, or it could be, it could be struggling with depression or a mental illness, or any other thing like that that's really frustrating them. And I think when that happens, it's almost pointless to really make a fuss about the religious aspect of Pesach and everything else. If they're angry at life in general, they usually don't have headspace for religion, no matter what happens. You can look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a little bit more about that. But so, mom, who I think it was dad who wrote this, I really encourage you to think about that. Very angry with life in general. I'm not delighted, God forbid. I'm impressed that you wrote it that way. That you wrote, our teenage daughter is very angry with, this is verbatim from emails that I got today and yesterday, very angry with life in general, comma, particularly with Judaism. So I would say focus on the wellness issue, much more than the issue of Pesach, because like I said, if the kids are struggling with real issues, whether it's trauma from the past or it's anxiety or other things like that that they're dealing with now, it's almost impossible to get them around to a place where they're ready to have discussions about religion until that is really solved or resolved. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. Unless anyone has any questions, I'll just wait a moment or two. Um, we're on next week, so like I said, I'll send you some reading material or some other things to review that discuss some of these issues in greater detail. And I really encourage you during the week, think about some issues. Drop an email to that address, events at the Bright Beginnings. And I hope to do 2 more of these before Pesach. Just to really have an opportunity to discuss parenting. Does anyone else, folks, before we wrap it up, does anyone else have any question you'd like to ask? If you do, now's the time. I'm sorry. This was to me. Okay, Lior, I see. Send an email back to that address. Okay. The young lady who wrote that comment wanted to follow up. So the email that you sent to the events, send me back an email. I'll see if we can find some time to talk during the week. Okay, folks, I really wish you mazel and bracha. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Etty. Yeah, oh, by the way, you can use the chat feature. I'm sorry, I should have said that earlier. You can use the chat feature if there's something you'd like to say. I have a YouTube channel that's just under my name, Yakov Horowitz. If you go to YouTube and you look up Yakov Horowitz, there's a subscribe button that you can, you'll get notified when I post up new things. But all of my recordings, this included, will all be on that YouTube page. And like I said, the parts that we spoke about, those various references, I'll be sending that to you in a group email. It'll come from a constant contact. So maybe check your spam. I hope to get it out within a day or two. Oh, Natalie, question. Getting kids off electronics earlier. Okay. Yes, I did say I would do that. I did not yet. So very quickly, maybe we'll leave that more for next week. So Natalie wanted to follow up on the idea of getting kids off electronics, because they've been so maxed out on technology. You know what? It's late. Natalie, we'll leave it for next week. Okay. I'm going to take that question first next week, Emir Tashem, about some ideas for getting your children slowly weaned off technology. Not that we as adults are that much better, but we'll take that up next week. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I really hope you found this helpful. Look for the email. Like I said, I hope to get it for you by tomorrow morning, if not by tomorrow night. And I'll see you all next Monday night. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you found it helpful.
Thank you.
Sure. Good night.